The most dramatic angle, Caesar didn't just conquer Gaul, he committed what many scholars consider the ancient world's most systematic genocide, killing or enslaving over 1 million people, and then wrote the propaganda himself to make Rome celebrate it. The rivers of central Gaul run brown in autumn. In the year 52 before the Common Era, they ran red. 40,000 Gallic warriors are pinned against the walls of Alesia, starving, watching their own women and children turned out through the gates because there is no food left to share. Beyond the ramparts, 250,000 men, the largest relief army Gaul has ever assembled, crash against Roman siege lines in the darkness, torches swaying like dying stars. And between these two desperate forces, calm as a man reviewing accounts, rides Gaius Julius Caesar on a red-cloaked horse, directing slaughter with the precision of an engineer adjusting waterworks. He is not defending Rome. Rome is 1,000 miles away and has not been threatened. He is here because 8 years ago he made a choice not of duty, but of ambition, so naked it still burns through the centuries. He chose to turn an entire civilization into a stepping stone between the walls and the relief army, the expelled civilians, women, the elderly, children, huddle in the no-man's land, and Caesar refuses to let them pass. They will die there in the mud because their suffering pressures the garrison. This is the man who wrote his own history, and even he could not omit this detail. To understand how a Roman aristocrat became the architect of continental devastation, you must understand what Rome was in the 1st century before the Common Era, a republic eating itself alive. The old senatorial families clung to power like men gripping the rim of a well, staring down into the dark. Below them, populist generals had discovered that armies loyal to commanders, rather than the state, could remake the political order. Marius had done it. Sulla had done it with blood prescriptions that left the Forum stinking of iron. Caesar grew up in that shadow, a patrician by blood, a populist by calculation, and a debtor by spectacular habit. By his early 40s, he owed fortunes that would bankrupt a province. He needed a war, not for glory alone, but for survival. A provincial command meant legal immunity from prosecution, and, if the conquest was rich enough, the wealth to purchase the future. In 58 BCE, the Senate granted him Cisalpine Gaul, Transalpine Gaul, and Illyricum. It was meant to be a modest posting. Caesar saw something else entirely. Beyond the Roman province lay an immense world the Romans called Gallia Comata, long-haired Gaul, stretching from the Pyrenees to the Rhine, populated by dozens of nations with sophisticated agriculture, road networks, hilltop cities, and metalwork that rivaled anything in the Mediterranean. These were not savages. The Aedui traded wine with Roman merchants. The Arverni minted their own gold coins. Druids maintained a vast oral tradition of law and philosophy that took 20 years to master. But Caesar would describe them as barbarians because the narrative required it. His method was elegant and ruthless. He exploited existing tribal rivalries, offering Roman friendship to the weak against the strong, then turning on the weak once the strong were broken. The Helvetii were migrating westward, a movement that threatened no Roman territory, and Caesar fell upon them at Bibracte, killing over 100,000 and forcing the survivors back to their burned homeland. The following year he routed the Germanic king Ariovistus, then the Belgae, then the Veneti, whose fleet he destroyed by cutting their rigging with hooked blades. Each campaign was presented to Rome in his dispatches, the Commentari de Bello Gallico, written in the third person with the cold elegance of a man narrating someone else's destiny. He wrote that the entire Senate of the Veneti was executed after their defeat. He wrote it without comment, as though recording weather. Back in Rome, the dispatches were read aloud in the Forum, and crowds cheered. The Senate voted unprecedented thanksgivings. Caesar was becoming exactly what he needed to become: too successful to prosecute, too popular to ignore. His soldiers adored him. He shared their hardships on the march, remembered their names, paid them from plunder that flowed like the rivers of Gaul itself. And all the while, behind the spectacle, a civilization was being methodically disassembled. The pivot comes in the winter of 54 BCE, when the thing Caesar never expected begins to happen. Gaul fights back as one. Ambiorix of the Eburones lures a Roman garrison into an ambush and destroys it entirely. 15 cohorts lost in the forests of modern Belgium. It is the worst Roman military disaster in a generation, and it cracks the illusion of invincibility. Across Gaul, nations that had submitted begin to reconsider. Into this moment steps Vercingetorix of the Arverni, young, charismatic, and possessed of a strategic mind that genuinely troubled Caesar. Vercingetorix understood that the legions could not be beaten in open battle. Instead, he adopted scorched earth, burning his own people's towns, destroying grain stores, denying Caesar forage. At Avaricum, the Gauls begged Vercingetorix to spare their beautiful city. He relented. Caesar besieged it for 27 days in freezing rain, then stormed the walls. His soldiers killed every living thing inside: 40,000 men, women, and children. Caesar records the number. He does not record a single Roman voice raised in protest. At Gergovia, Vercingetorix dealt Caesar a rare tactical defeat, and the psychological effect was electric. More tribes joined the revolt. For the first time in 8 years, Caesar's enterprise in Gaul teetered. Then came Alesia. Vercingetorix withdrew his 80,000 warriors behind the walls of this hilltop fortress and waited for relief. Caesar, outnumbered, did something that belongs more to madness than to military science. He built a wall around the entire fortress, 11 miles of fortification facing inward, and then built a second wall facing outward to hold off any relief force. You are standing in the command position on the western ridge, and in every direction the earth has been reshaped by Roman engineering: ditches, stakes, towers, caltrops hidden in pits, a landscape transformed into a killing architecture. The relief army arrives. Ancient sources claim 250,000, likely exaggerated, but even conservative estimates dwarf Caesar's 70,000. For 3 days, the battle rages on both sides of the Roman lines simultaneously. Caesar rides between crises, his red cloak visible to both sides, a symbol and a target. At the critical moment, he personally leads the cavalry reserve into the flank of the relief army, and it breaks. The next day, Vercingetorix rides out alone. The sources differ on details. Some say he circled Caesar's tribunal in full armor, dismounted, and sat in silence at his feet. Caesar kept him alive, not from mercy, but because he needed a trophy. Vercingetorix would spend 6 years in a Roman dungeon before being paraded in Caesar's triumph and strangled in public. The pacification that followed Alesia was methodical annihilation. Caesar sold entire populations into slavery, 1 million people by Plutarch's estimate. The Eburones, whose king Ambiorix had humiliated Rome, were subjected to a campaign of extermination so thorough that Caesar invited neighboring Germanic tribes to help hunt down survivors.